Imagine waking up on a cold winter's day and not being able to feel your feet. The house you live in doesn't have a functioning furnace, only a pellet stove that keeps one room lukewarm. Think about taking a shower and having only hot water for 5 minutes before it turns to ice. What about having no water at all because your family couldn't afford to pay the bill? Having to steal food from high school just so your parents could afford to give your sister money for lunch. This was my life growing up. There are many reasons why I should have just given up in life. I was born with the odds against me, and my father was in and out of my life all throughout my childhood. When he was there, he drank in heavy amounts, and he could never keep a stable job. This caused a lot of stress throughout my life and my mother's life. My mother, although she did the best that she could, she wasn't there at night. She works 12 to 16-hour night shifts trying to make ends meet. Life was very difficult. There are many children that have a similar life to what I had growing up. Some have it even worse. We are what you would call a statistic, having all the odds stacked against us and paving a way for failure. No one is in the corners to support you. You are alone, and that is what I felt all throughout my life. There was a time where all of this didn't matter. I was 7 and going on a family trip. We were going to Canada, and I was super excited because this was my first vacation ever. I wanted to see everything that I could: the falls, Ripley's Wax Museum, and Shamu the killer whale. This small 5-night vacation changed my life forever. Before we left the house for the trip, my mom packed the essentials. I mean, why wouldn't you pack anything and everything for a clumsy 7-year-old? She even packed my pink, sparkly Barbie camera. Thinking back, I think she did that so that way I would leave her camera alone. As we wandered through Canada, I would snap photos of everything that I could, not only with my awesome flashy Barbie camera, but with hers that I stole away from her as well. I started to feel overjoyed. I couldn't put the camera down, and I had to record everything. It was at that moment I realized my passion was photography. When we returned from the trip, I had my mother pull out a photo book that we had. I wanted to see the different styles, but more importantly, I wanted to see the stories that were captured in the moment. Photos aren't just material things that we slap on a wall and go, yep, I was there. They are a priceless memory, frozen in time, waiting for someone to go see and experience that moment. At least, that's what photography means to me. At the age of 8, I made the mistake of telling a family member I wanted to be a photographer when I grew up. While laughing, they said I would be a starving artist living in a box. Why couldn't I have a realistic dream, they expressed. This crushed my every ambition that I had to become a photographer or even an artist. I wasn't able to see myself with a camera in hand anymore. These words were spoken to me all throughout my life and even through middle school. My passion was crushed, and I quit dreaming overall. My self-esteem was at an all-time low. I began to have chronic nightmares, some of which I would watch my family die. I started to not try in school, and I sat in the back of the class, disinterested in everything. Why try when no one's in your corner? I was alone. In the summer of 2010, life got worse. My mother lost her job, and this put us in a world of hell. We were put on food stamps and government assistance for the time being. The money that was coming in was cut in half, bills started to go unpaid, and our pantry became dried up. I decided that I needed to help my family. I needed a job. So, at the age of 16, I got a job as a non-foods clerk in Kroger. Normally, high school students would be saving their money for, a car or college. I wasn't saving. I was putting food on the table so that way my family could survive. I even had to get my mother's car out of repossession, and I went on to buy pellets for the pellet stove so that way we could be warm in the winter. This was my life. The dark tunnel that I entered when I was 8 was still going. To me, it was endless. My anxiety became worse and depression started to take me. I knew that my life would be as hard as my mother's, and I would work a job that I ultimately hated, and I would just hate life overall. Although at the time I didn't know, all these emotions started flooding into my head, caused me to have chronic panic attacks. Suicide became a common thought in my head, and the voices told me that I was worthless, that no one cared about me, I was just another failure, and that I would never amount to anything in life, and that I should just vanish to make everyone happy. While life was spiraling out of control, I still had to go to school and act like everything was okay. My motto for life became, "It'll be okay." If I could tell myself that, it had to be true, right? My junior year in high school redeveloped my life. I took a photography class with Mr. Grimes. It was an entry-level class that dealt primarily in the darkroom and dabbled in digital photography and Photoshop. As we toured the darkroom on the first day, I became overwhelmed with emotions. The smell of chemicals became intoxicating. The ambient red light used for processing gave me a sense of warmth. The trickling running water of the wash bath calmed me. I was at home. I was able to find myself, and there was just something about this room that sent me back to when I was 7. Our first assignment was how to properly expose a photograph for film and how to create test strips for a proper exposure while making a print. When I picked up that camera, I felt unstoppable. I felt that I could do anything that I wanted to do, and I could be who I wanted to be. I felt safe. My passion for photography came back. I took as many photography classes as I could. I made myself review the notes over and over until they became second nature to me. I was inspired. Mr. Grimes started to notice how I glowed in the darkroom, and even when I wasn't in his class, he would let me use it. During study hall, I frequented his classroom and developed dozens of rolls of film throughout the years. He gave me something that no one else gave me: hope. I finally felt like I was no longer a statistic, and I began to dream. The following year, to my surprise, I got my first DSLR camera for Christmas, a Canon T3i Rebel. Tears flowed from my eyes. This camera was what I dreamed about owning when I was 7. A camera where I could switch out the lenses and take photos of the insect world or capture the galaxies above. And of course, I had no idea what I was doing with this camera, so auto became the default mode, just like when I was 7 with film. I documented everything that I could. And I also developed this weird habit of taking my camera everywhere with me, to my grandparents, to school, to work, everywhere. I took as many photos as I could of the world around me, and even decided to take the 365-day challenge. This was a challenge to get me out of my comfort zone and to give the world an idea of who I was by taking a photo of myself for a whole year. This meant I had to start to venture away from the world of auto and into the world of manual. This is where my passion exploded. My confidence began to grow as my SD cards filled. No one could stop me. While going through all the typical high school drama that everyone else does, I met this guy named Kyle. He was at OSU going for a computer science major, and right off the bat, we became inseparable. Figuratively speaking, there are 80 miles between Westchester and Columbus. Our relationship thrived, and he endured every painstaking photo that I took. We ventured around campus, and he would drag me to weird spots just for me to take photos and document our time together. He saw a fire inside of me that no one else did, and that fire only grew. He was so interested in how I could create what he would call passionate images. I started to teach him the ropes of photography and how to take a successful image by using the rule of thirds and the golden rule. I even allowed him to use my baby, which was my camera, while visiting the zoo at one point. I opened up to him more than I had anyone else, and he became my light. Over time, I was able to purchase Lightroom, a photo editing software, and this was a massive turning point in my photographic career. Because Kyle was so interested in my photos, I wanted to see if I could produce something worthy of giving to him as a gift. I began to edit every photo that I took, and when I mean every photo, I mean every photo. I can't tell you how many times I would sit up at my desktop until 2 a.m. just to make the perfect image. I became obsessed. I wanted to understand the program inside and out so that way I could teach Kyle as well. My basic photos of trees and people weren't cutting my photographic lust any longer, and I had to create something of my own. I wanted to represent my life in a single image, something that I could reflect what I was feeling at that very moment and still show my past. Fragmented was born, a series of which I reflected my heart to the sky. As Kyle and I grew closer to one another, we decided this was time to take a giant step in our relationship. So we found a cute little apartment in Hamilton, Ohio, and we moved in together in 2013. This was the first time I ever was out of the house and living with someone, especially a guy. It was traumatizing. My anxiety skyrocketed and everything became too much at that very moment. And the worst happened. One of my friends told me that my photos were garbage and that I would never make it as a photographer in the real world. Once again, my world was crushed. I became extremely depressed and all my dreams were questioned once more. I mean, how could I ever think that my photos would be good enough for the public eye? I told Kyle that I was selling my camera, and that sparked one of the biggest fights that we've ever had. After hours and hours of arguing, he broke down and told me with tears in his eyes that he couldn't stand to see me sell my camera and that I needed to support myself with my passion. He couldn't see me throw away my future just because of one critic. 3 days later, we go to his stepbrother's wedding, and of course he made me bring my camera. I ended up forgetting what my friend told me, and I snapped photos of everything that I could, like I normally did. The photographer for the wedding noticed this, and he noticed that I was avoiding angles that he was getting, but I was getting others. He approached me, gave me a business card, and said that if I called his studio, I would have a job. And just like that, I went on to work for Images by Daniel Michael. This was the moment I believed in myself, just like others had. And that's when my dream became a reality. You see, if I never picked up a camera again, I wouldn't have had these experiences, nor would I have had the support that others gave me to push me through all my negativity throughout my life. Growing up, I always thought there was no one supporting me, and I was right, because I surrounded myself with the wrong type of people. I was 100% in the dark. I had no drive. I settled for the worst possible outcome for myself as well. It was because of the people who saw that what photography did to me that pushed me to the direction that I needed. Kyle and Daniel Michael became two of my mentors and always pushed me to my creative limits, so that way I could be someone that I could be proud of. It was because of them I saved up and bought a Nikon D750 and began to explore the world of photography more. I grew up with the idea that I could never hold a camera again. And here I am today, making my dreams a reality. As a future educator, I have the drive to understand each and every one of my students. I want them to feel like there's someone there that would support them and help them find themselves along their high school career. We owe it to our students to believe in them and to show that it is okay to be themselves. We have to inspire our students, because if we don't, who will? Thank you.